Whispers beneath the Sakura Rain. There is a silence known only to the mountains. It lingers in the space between winter's retreat and spring's arrival, when the snow is not yet gone, but the plum blossoms have begun to stir. In that hush, where footsteps echo like prayers and every gust of wind carries a memory, a girl was born beneath the old sakura tree of Minazuki village. Her name was Aika, written with the kanji for love and song. It was a name whispered by her dying mother, as the scent of cherry petals swept across the floor of the birthing room, stirred by a breeze that came from nowhere. Villagers believed that the sakura tree had a spirit, kodama, they said, or something older. The elders warned children not to sleep beneath it, for the tree remembered every soul that had passed beneath its boughs and was said to whisper their names on moonless nights. And yet it was beneath that very tree Aika would often sit, her ink-stained fingers tracing characters into old scrolls, listening for voices that might never come. Her father, Akihiro, was a swordsmith, silent and solemn, his hands shaped steel the way poets shaped grief. In him was the soul of the mountain, unyielding, and carved by years of silence. He never spoke of Aika's mother, not once, not even when the girl asked. But Aika knew there was a story in his eyes. It lived there, between the lines of his frown and the way he would pause when the spring wind carried the scent of flowers not yet bloomed. The scent of hot iron, mixed with the faint perfume of rain-soaked earth. Aika stood at the entrance of her father's forge, barefoot, hair unbound, clutching a folded piece of parchment. Her sleeves were rolled past her elbows, stained with ink and ash. The quiet hum of the bellows pulsed like a distant drumbeat. "Is this poem yours?" she asked. Akihiro did not look up. Sparks danced in the dim light, flaring like fireflies caught between breaths. He dipped the glowing blade into a trough of water. Steam screamed. Silence returned. Aika waited. Her fingers creased the edge of the parchment. Once, twice, again. At last he spoke. "I wrote it when I was your age." "Burn it." She did not move. "Why?" "Because it remembers too much. It was always like this." He answered in fragments, like shards of a broken cup. Never whole. Never sharp enough to hold meaning, only to cut. She glanced down at the poem again. It was clumsy and aching and beautiful. In the forge of the heart, iron does not melt, it sings. She folded it back into her sleeve. Outside, the sakura tree shuddered as wind passed through its branches. Petals fell like pale snow. One caught in Aika's hair and stayed. That night, in her room lit by a single oil lamp, Aika traced her fingers over the old scroll she had found in the shrine near the edge of the woods. It spoke of a woman who sang to spirits and brought peace to restless trees. Her name had been smudged by time, but the scroll whispered of a bond between voice and wind, of how the mountains remember. Aika wondered, as the lamp flickered and shadows danced, if her mother's voice had once echoed in such a way. And as sleep came for her, soft and slow, the sakura tree whispered outside her window. Her name. The next morning arrived cloaked in mist. Aika wandered through the fog, a satchel slung over her shoulder. On her way to the village shrine, the ground was damp, leaves slick underfoot, but she moved as though guided by memory rather than sight. She paused at the foot of the stairs that led to the torii gate, her fingers brushing the bark of the sakura tree. The air trembled faintly, as though something old had stirred. Inside the shrine, the scent of old wood and incense clung to the air. The tatami mats creaked beneath her as she knelt before the altar. A tattered paper talisman fluttered from the rafters. She placed the scroll she had studied the night before on the wooden floor, and unrolled it again. There was more. Beneath the faded ink she had read, a second layer of text had begun to surface, stained in pale blue, like watermarks or breath. Words that only the dew of morning had coaxed into visibility. The voice is not breath, but memory. Speak with your soul, and the forest will answer. Aika's breath caught. She traced the words, lips moving silently. Suddenly, from outside the shrine, a rustle, a flicker of movement through the open doors. A boy stood just beyond the threshold, barefoot and windblown, hair the color of scorched cedar. His eyes were the color of deep river stone, gray, unreadable. He looked at her. "You heard it too, didn't you?" Aika's heart skipped. "The whisper?" He nodded. "The tree spoke last night." She rose slowly. "Who are you?" He hesitated. "Kaito." "Kaito," she repeated, as if tasting the name. "You're not from Minazuki." "No." He looked past her, at the scroll. "But I came for her song." Aika turned to look at the scroll again. The text had faded once more, vanishing like a dream upon waking. Wind rushed through the shrine. The talisman above snapped in the air. From outside, the sakura tree shivered. Something was beginning. And it carried the weight of voices too long held in silence. They met again beneath the sakura tree 2 days later. The rain had washed the village paths clean, and the petals stuck to the earth like whispers trying to rise. Kaito brought nothing with him. No satchel, no food, no name beyond what he had given. But he listened as Aika read from her scrolls, and in the quiet between her words, he hummed low melodies that made the tree stir. "Where did you learn those songs?" she asked. Kaito didn't answer. Instead, he placed his palm on the roots of the tree and closed his eyes. Aika watched the way his brow furrowed, the way his body seemed to pulse in time with the rustling of the leaves. She did the same, pressed her own hand beside his, and waited. There was no language in what followed, only sensation, warmth, sadness, a fleeting joy like laughter beneath a waterfall, a hush that carried the weight of seasons. When they pulled away, Aika was trembling. Kaito finally spoke. The tree is dying. She shook her head. It blooms every spring. Yes, but its voice grows fainter. That night, she did not sleep. She wrote instead, words tumbling from her like falling petals, of trees that remembered, of voices caught in bark, of girls who sang to spirits older than storms. And in the space between one ink stroke and the next, she heard the tree weep. Far from Minazuki, deep in a forest no map dared name, something stirred. A shrine long forgotten shuddered. Stone foxes cracked open their sealed eyes. The song was awakening. Minazuki's sky turned restless. Crows circled the ridges, their calls sharp as splinters. The wind shifted without warning, carrying with it the smell of distant ash. Aika noticed the silence first. Not the quiet of peace, but a hollow absence, like breath held too long. She found Kaito waiting by the riverbank, staring into the current. The voices are moving, he said before she could speak. Something old has begun to walk again. A spirit? He shook his head. Not one, many. The trees along the river shivered. Aika felt it too now, an echo without source, pulsing beneath the soles of her feet. You said the tree was dying, she murmured. But what if it's calling for help? Kaito turned to her. Then we need to listen, not just with ears. They returned to the shrine together. Aika carried scrolls. Kaito carried only silence. By twilight, they had surrounded the altar with sheets of rice paper, arranged like petals in bloom. Aika dipped her brush in ink, closed her eyes, and let her hand move. Not writing, remembering. Symbols poured forth. Some old, some forgotten, some that had no name. Kaito sang. No words, only notes, pure and aching, drawn from the marrow of mountains. The wind stopped, then a breath moved through the shrine. Not air, not voice. Presence. The talisman above the altar split in two, falling like a leaf to the floor. And in the woods beyond, something stepped free from the shadow of an old god's dream. The echo had found a body, and it remembered its name. The echo wore no face, only memory. It stepped into Minazuki with the hush of falling ash, and the petals withdrew from its path. Aika and Kaito stood at the tree's base, their fingers entwined in shared fear and understanding. It knows me, Aika whispered. It knows all who have sung, Kaito replied, and those who've forgotten how. The tree pulsed with a soft inner glow, veins of light moving through bark. Aika stepped forward. If it takes me, she said, write it down. No, Kaito said, voice cracking. We do this together. So they sang. Her voice was a thread, his, a weight. The echo paused. Petals rained like tears. The old gods turned in their sleep. Then, a single note, sharp and rising. Aika's ink scattered across the altar. Kaito screamed. And the sakura tree bloomed, not with flowers, but with names. Thousands, from roots to highest limb. Names the wind had carried, the ink had captured, and the songs had stirred. Aika's mother's name among them. Then silence. When Aika opened her eyes, she stood alone. The tree no longer whispered, but the wind carried her song. And somewhere far off, deep in an unseen shrine, the echo listened still.